Hello. We'll see if anyone else is joining us. I don't know what's going on, so I'm just gonna give it a couple minutes. Otherwise, you and I can talk about cybersecurity. Yay! Well, I'm just gonna get started, and if people filter in, they filter in. This is recorded, as I'm sure you're aware. So just did a brief overview. We're opening this up to the Region 8 RPIC, which includes Utah, Colorado, Wyoming. So we might see some new faces joining us throughout Tech Talk from around the region. And you know who I am, so I don't need to introduce myself to you, Tom. But I'm going to be doing most of the Tech Talk, so we're going to see if we can get some guests in on some of the more specific detailed topics like artificial intelligence and things like that. But today we're going to be talking about cybersecurity, specifically cybersecurity as it affects nonprofit organizations and non-governmental organizations. So to begin with, for just kind of a framework for everybody, cybersecurity refers to the practice of protecting computer systems, networks, programs, and data from digital attacks, damage that's caused by digital attacks, theft, or unauthorized access. So cybersecurity can help protect you and everybody in your organization from a lot of different things. Some of the more common ones that we're going to discuss in a little bit more detail include malware, which is malicious programs designed to damage something or gain unauthorized access to something on your computer system. Ransomware, which is a type of malware specifically designed to block access to your computer until you pay them some money of some kind. And then social engineering, which are techniques used to obtain and compromise information about an organization. That includes things like phishing, which we'll talk a little bit more about in the upcoming slides. So cybersecurity is super important for a lot of reasons. These are just a couple of examples of what will happen if your information is hacked, you get malicious software, those types of things. So the first example is out of California. A company called Efficient Escrow of California had to completely close its doors and lay off its entire staff when a cyber thief came in, gained access to their company's bank data, and used a form of malware to take $1.5 million. Because of this, they had to close down their company. They didn't have the funds to keep processing escrow, and it caused a lot of problems for the people employed at that company. Another example is a car dealership in Kansas, Green Ford Sales. They lost about $23,000 when hackers broke into their network and took bank account information. So they added 9 fake employees to the company's payroll in less than 24 hours and paid them about $63,000 before the company caught on to what was happening. And they could only stop some of those transfers. So when this happens, you think that everything will get all better. You found it out, but there are times when that money is very hard to recoup, and it's very hard to stop something that's already happened. And cybersecurity incidences don't just happen at businesses, private businesses. It doesn't just happen to government organizations. It can happen to nonprofits and non-governmental organizations as well. The final example I have of what kind of things can happen is a nonprofit called Philabundance. And in 2020, this hunger relief organization from Pennsylvania was scammed out of more than $923,000 because they were able to get a hold of legitimate emails from a construction company that they were using. And instead, the attackers emailed a fake invoice and they paid the fake invoice instead. So these kinds of problems don't just happen to big businesses. It's not just Amazon. It's not just going to be a government organization like the Social Security Agency. It could be a community action agency. It could be a homeless shelter. It could happen to anyone. And so we're going to talk a little bit about why this matters to nonprofits, what kind of things you can see, and the best practices for staff as well as your organization as a whole. So a report published by the Nonprofit Technology Enterprise Network, or NTNN, revealed that 68% of nonprofits don't have documented policies and procedures in place should a cyber attack occur. And less than 50% have some sort of internal procedures or policies to manage how data is shared with external agencies. In addition to that, 71% of nonprofits usually allow staff members to use unsecured personal devices to access their emails, business files, and do a variety of things. And so nonprofits kind of are often more vulnerable to cyber attacks. You would think that it won't happen, but when they do, nonprofit organizations tend to be unprepared. In addition to that, nonprofit and non-governmental organizations often face distinct challenges that arise from their organizational structure, funding constraints, limitations on what tools are available that they can use. Some big vulnerabilities at nonprofits can include limited cybersecurity experience. A lot of nonprofits lack like a dedicated IT department. And so they usually will use a third party. And because of that, they can lack the expertise and the resources to implement and maintain like good security measures for their online data. Nonprofits also frequently collaborate, like I said, with third-party vendors or service providers. And it's not just for IT management. They use them for things like fundraising, cloud storage, website management. And these external partnerships can also create additional entry points for cyber attacks. And so if there aren't proper security protocols, then you are more vulnerable to having something happen to your organization. The last big vulnerability that we often see in nonprofit and non-governmental organizations is a lack of awareness and prioritization. So nonprofits, a lot of the time, especially if you're smaller, underestimate the severity of cyber threats or believe that they're less likely to be targeted than larger organizations because they don't have as much money as, say, an Amazon.com or a Google. This specific perception can lead to a lack of awareness and a failure to prioritize cybersecurity measures, and it makes people more susceptible to those attacks. So some common forms of cybersecurity attacks that nonprofits may face specifically are going to be things like malware, ransomware, social engineering, and data breaches from their own employees. And these aren't necessarily malicious data breaches. And we're going to talk about each of these in turn. Usually when a cyber attack is done to a nonprofit organization, they're trying to obtain a lot of data from you. They want to know your mailing lists, your donation forms, meeting records, donor and vendor records. Maybe they can get information about your donor bank accounts and any of your financial information. So nonprofits have a lot of information that people want without the realization that they have a lot of data and information that people want. So while we go through the next few slides, I want you to think about how this might affect you and what you can do, and then we'll talk about some best practices that exist that we want you to think about when you come to work every day. But first, let's talk a little bit about malware. So, malware is just short for malicious software, and it can refer to any kind of software program designed to harm or exploit your computer systems, your computer network, and any of your devices. This isn't just something that happens on like your desktop computer or your laptop computer. It can be your cell phone, it can be a tablet. Um, Malware can happen pretty much on any device. It's a broad term that includes a bunch of different harmful software types, and we're going to talk about a few of them. But protecting against malware usually involves some sort of antivirus and anti-malware software. It also involves you being cautious about suspicious links that you get in emails or suspicious downloads, and practicing safe online behavior, which we'll talk about those best practices in just a little bit. But I do want to highlight a few types of malware that might affect you and your organization. And it might not just affect your organization, these could affect you at home as well, and your personal bank account information, social security information, and health information. The first type of malware is a virus. And I'm sure you've heard of computer viruses or worms, things like that. They're basically programs that attach themselves to legitimate files and then they replicate it when the file that you're using that's been infected by it is executed. They are often spread with emails that you'll get, and they'll have a document attached, and you'll open it, and then that's when the virus will get on your computer. Or somebody will send it to you through cloud storage, and you'll click on it, and it'll go through your computer. Your IT department or your third party IT management service, usually for your organization, will make sure that you have some sort of antivirus software or anti malware software on your computer. But a lot of people don't have it personally at home. So if you haven't had an experience with a computer virus at home and you don't have antivirus software, it's recommended that you check out any kind of antivirus software that you can have on your computer. There's some free versions, but you do need to be careful that you're selecting a reputable company. The next type of malware is adware. Adware displays unwanted ads on your device. This used to happen a lot in like the 90s, where you'd get a bunch of pop-ups on your screen, block everything out. They're not always malicious. A lot of the times they're just really, really annoying. But it can be intrusive and it can impact how your computer is running. It can cause things like it to slow down, freeze. So, although it might not put a virus on your computer, adware is something that we want to watch out for so that our computers remain functioning all throughout the day. The next type of malware is keyloggers. It's kind of what it sounds like. It basically records what you're typing and how you're typing it on your computer, and then it takes the information that you're typing, like your login credentials, so your username and password, or your credit card numbers, and it sends it to the person that put the keylogger on your computer. Keyloggers can come kind of attached to a file, just like a virus as well. It could be a person physically who has access to your computer who could put it on there. The big part about keyloggers is most people won't realize that they have it on their computer. So you want to make sure that you're not providing unauthorized access to people, even in your own office, to your computer, because you never know what someone else might put on your computer. Finally, is a Trojan horse. I'm sure we all know the story of the Trojan horse. This is exactly what it sounds like. Trojans disguise themselves as legitimate software, but they contain some sort of code in them that will replicate, and you won't really know that it's there because you expect the file to be a valid file. You will click on the file and you execute it. It doesn't just turn on by itself. And you usually do it unknowingly. And slowly over time, you'll realize that there is something wrong with your computer. But oftentimes, if you don't have the appropriate anti malware or antivirus software, you won't notice a Trojan horse right away. It'll take a little bit of time. A big type of malware on its own that I wanted to pull out separately is ransomware. And you guys may start hearing a lot about ransomware or have heard about it on the news. It's a type of malware designed to block access to a computer system or specific files on your computer system until somebody pays money. And usually, whoever is holding this information ransom wants that in cryptocurrency because it's difficult to track. If payments aren't made, attackers hack the data and they will potentially expose the information to a variety of different places, to the public on the dark web, give it to people who are looking to pay for social security numbers and things. Even after paying a ransom, though, there is no assurance that a situation will be resolved. So the big thing to remember about ransomware is doesn't matter if you pay the ransom or not, something bad might happen. So if it happens to your company, you should have an incident plan in place. But the big recommendation is not to pay the ransom, because you may pay them the money and it doesn't solve your issue at all. They'll just take the data anyway, or they'll keep you locked out and ask for more. Nonprofits have started to be more aware of ransomware. Like I said, we usually as a nonprofit don't have millions and billions of dollars that they can get into, but they might have a lot of information that's really important. And so it's easy for them to ask you for a specific sum of money because they will leak your, if you're a, you assist with like a health issue, they would leak your client's health data. Or if you have social security numbers, they would leak your client's social security data. So you want to keep ransomware in mind. It's something that more and more insurance companies are wanting you to get cybersecurity or cyber insurance for, is to make sure that you don't have situations where you end up locked out because of ransomware. There are a couple of different kinds of ransomware. There's crypto ransomware. So you're not just locked out. They encrypt all of your data and your files, and then they say, give me money, and then I will decrypt it and you can read it again. There's a locker ransom, which is the one that restricts your access to your data or applications, even your entire system. And they normally post the demand on a lock screen, usually accompanied by a countdown clock, because countdown clocks make you feel a sense of urgency and you think you have to pay it right now or something bad is going to happen. Next is scareware. It intimidates victims with false threats of extorting money. So usually it'll request payment by claiming that you have a virus on your computer or some other issue with your computer. You'll see like a pop-up usually. It's a really like angry pop-up that'll say, hey, I need you to pay this much money or buy this thing so that your computer can get disinfected. These usually are harmful files and you don't want to do that. If you see a random pop-up, you're on a website and it pops up and it says, your computer's infected, you'll probably want to run your antivirus software or talk to your IT management company or IT person to make sure that nothing occurred on your computer. Finally is doxware. This is people threatening to disclose the sensitive information that they are able to obtain in places like dark web forums or to the public, unless their ransom is paid. I don't know if you've heard of people doxing people, but it's basically releasing information that wouldn't normally be available. When we talk about the dark web, we're talking about the shadier side of the internet where people go to obtain information that wouldn't normally be available. So this isn't something that you would go to and go dark web forum on Google. This would be somewhere that people who do these types of things go to find out more information. Next, we're going to talk about social engineering. Social engineering isn't a software tactic. It isn't like a hardware thing. It's a form of manipulation. It's used to deceive people into providing information that's confidential or sensitive, or performing actions that you would probably be better off not doing. Unlike traditional hacking methods, like I said, that exploit vulnerabilities in your technology, social engineering is a person using human psychology to convince somebody to trust them or to comply with what they want because they're a legitimate person. And there are a lot of different forms of social engineering. I focused on 4 specifically on this slide for you guys that you may experience in your office, others might experience in your office, or you may experience in your daily life. The first is phishing. Many people are familiar with phishing. I have been a trainer about technology topics for a long time, and every year somebody has given me a phishing training or I've had a phishing test. Basically what it is somebody is using a deceptive email or a message or a website that mimics something that's legitimate, like your boss. And they trick you into giving them information like passwords or credit card numbers or bank account information, because you think they're a legitimate entity. We're going to look at a couple of examples of emails that are phishing and the next one impersonation in just a moment so that you can see kind of what you need to look out for. So impersonation is when attackers impersonate authority figures or your coworkers or trusted entities. Um, and they want to gain your trust so that they'll do or that you'll do what they want you to do, like purchasing gift cards. That's a common one. So I get pretty much monthly an email that is supposed to look like my boss Andrea, the executive director, asking me to do fill in the blank, go buy gift cards, click on this link and move money around, tell her what a deposit was. And I have like an email filter that'll move those to junk or delete them automatically. But you want to be careful because some of them do look really legitimate. Next is vishing, and I don't know if any of you take phone calls at your position, but vishing uses phone calls similar to what phishing does, rather than emails or messages to trick people. So callers will call in and they'll try to impersonate legitimate entities. A big one is government agencies like the Social Security Administration, and they'll tell you you need to give them a bunch of information or something bad is going to happen to your Social Security information. Or they'll tell you they'll pretend to be your bank and they'll tell you that they need your password to be able to do something in your bank account. So they can be really convincing on the phone. But know that when you are talking to your bank or a government agency, they are never going to ask you for your username and password. That's a big one I hear a lot is people get asked on the phone, what's your password? And they automatically want to give it to somebody. Your first instinct when somebody asks you for your password is to not share it because they shouldn't be having that information. They should have another way, if they're a legitimate entity, to get the information that they're looking for in your file. And finally is baiting. Baiting is when somebody entices people with something desirable, like free software or a free gift card if you enter your information. And after you click on the link or download the file, malicious software is then installed on your computer and it can get your information, lock you out, that type of thing. This is really common with antivirus software, which we just talked about. They'll tell you, hey, click this link to get free antivirus software. And in reality, it's installing a virus on your computer. So you want to be careful when you're getting emails or messages or looking at websites that you're only clicking on legitimate links. So where did it go? I lost my little example. We'll look at it in a little bit here. We're going to talk about data breaches by employees first. So about 88% of all data breach incidences are caused by an employee's mistake. And that's not a bad thing. We're all human. We all make mistakes. They happen through a variety of different actions, and they can result in unauthorized access, theft of sensitive information, disclosure of sensitive information. Usually these things aren't malicious. We're not going out there to tanker companies, to tanker organizations. Usually either we're just careless or we don't know any better. So the common causes of data breaches are mishandling data. So well-meaning employees like you and me, we might accidentally and inadvertently cause a data breach because we sent sensitive information to the wrong person, or we mishandled some physical data, like we left important information in a public place, like in an Uber, or if you're not in North Dakota like I am, maybe a taxi, or on the subway, or you meant to send it to one person named Sarah, but you send it to another person named Sarah. So mishandling data is really common. And we just want to make sure that we pay extra attention, that we're sending emails to who we mean to, and that we're keeping all of our physical data with us in a protected place. Next is unauthorized access. It's when a person gains access, and that includes physical access, without permission to the network, to the system, or any other resource. The most common example of this, and I don't know if anyone has any secure buildings. I work with a Head Start and a childcare, so we do have secure doors to make sure that certain unauthorized people can't go in certain areas. The most common example of this is leaving the door propped open or allowing somebody who's not supposed to be in the area to enter in without verifying who they are. You just hold the door open because it's polite. So if you have an authorized access area in your building, or your building requires you to like beep a key card, you'll want to make sure that you're not propping open the door, that you're not letting somebody enter that you don't know who doesn't have access to it. That's the big form of unauthorized access. On unintentional data exfiltration, that sounds like super fancy, but that's just unknowingly transferring your data out of your organization through something that's not secure, like your personal email instead of your work email, or a cloud storage without proper security measures. So if I'm talking with a specific client for our veterans program, I don't want to send an email, an unencrypted email from my personal email account out. It should come from my work account and it needs to be encrypted. Or if I'm putting something in the cloud and I want to send it, I want to make sure that it's either properly password protected or encrypted. It sounds fancy. Exfiltration is a big word, but all it is sending data through a means that isn't secure. Finally is weak passwords and sharing credentials, and this is where I will stand on my soapbox. A lot of people use the same password for everything, and it is like password 123 or the name of your dog. When you're using weak passwords, or you share those passwords with others, and I have passwords for people that I should not know your password. But when you share passwords or you have weak passwords, it can cause a data breach because unauthorized individuals can find out what your password is really easy, or somebody else will access the data. So if I know your password and I share your password with somebody else, like my friend Holly, and Holly's not supposed to have access, she might be able to get into your computer just because I gave her your password. So passwords are super important. And we have some tips for passwords that we're going to talk a little bit about, but I want to emphasize you shouldn't be using weak passwords like password 123, and you shouldn't be sharing your password with just anybody. I shouldn't be sharing my password with all the other employees in my office because they don't need my password. So we're going to talk some staff best practices. As the previous slide said, a lot of the problems that occur usually have to come down to some sort of employee issue. Usually it's not malicious, it's usually just an accident. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping in mind the best practices to keep our data and our organization's data secure. So first is passwords. As I said, don't use a weak password. We want to use strong passwords. So these are going to be longer passwords that are more complicated. And you want to make sure that you're not using the same password for everything. I'm guilty. I've used the same password for like all of my streaming services. So my Amazon Prime, my Spotify, my Netflix, they all have the same password. And that can be a problem because if one person figures out your password, they can get into everything that you have. You'll also want to make sure that your password, your strong password, is changed regularly. And I know that's terrible. Changing your password means that you have to remember another password, and that can be a struggle. I used to work in an office where I had to change my password every 30 days. It was terrible, and I hated it. But also, I knew that my data and my information was secure because I regularly changed my password. I'm not saying you have to do it every month, but you should try to get on a schedule where you're changing your password every 60 days or every 90 days. Some offices have a set schedule, and you want to make sure that you're changing your password to something secure and strong each and every time. If you have trouble remembering your password, you can also use a trusted password manager. That's what I use. I have one on my phone. So when I need to log into somewhere, I can go into my password manager, find the password, and put it in from there. So I don't have to memorize all, 90 of my passwords, depending upon what I need them for. The next recommendation is using multi-factor authentication. So it used to be that a username and a password was enough to protect your information. But as technology evolves and people get smarter, just a password really isn't enough. So a lot of places, you probably experience it at your bank, maybe your office requires it, uses multi-factor authentication. So it's going to ask to send you a code to maybe your cell phone number or an authenticator app, so that you have to enter your username, your password, and a code that you would have on you on your cell phone in your authenticator app and another email in order to get in. So you're verifying yourself another time to make sure that you can get in. Finally, do not share your passwords. If you take anything away from this training, it should be do not share your passwords. I have had multiple experiences where people have shared their passwords with somebody and they went in and messed with their stuff. Maybe not maliciously. I know some people have logged in and just like flipped their screen upside down or changed the language to like Spanish from English, things like that. But you shouldn't be sharing your passwords, because that is one of the number one ways people can get into your computer, is you gave them your password. So if somebody calls you and they say, hey, I'm Bank of America, I need your password, you should tell them no, because Bank of America should never ask for your password. Next, we're going to talk emails and links. We talked a little bit about this when we were talking about malware. So the first thing is, don't open suspicious looking emails. If it sounds too good to be true, if it looks too good to be true, it's too good to be true. You shouldn't be opening them, clicking on links, downloading things. The same goes for clicking links and downloading attachments on a website. So if you're on a website and you don't know if that is a legitimate, trustful website, don't click and download all the things, because you might inadvertently download malicious software. Story time. I have an 11-year-old who has his own computer and plays video games, and he went on a site because he wanted to put something on his computer so that he could do something different in the game. So he downloaded what he thought was what he was looking for, and it ended up downloading malware on the computer. And then I had to spend 5 hours trying to get the malware off of the computer. So if my 11-year-old can do it and I can do it, anybody can do it. So just be extra careful that you're not downloading things that you're not sure is trustworthy, and you're not clicking on links that you are not sure are trustworthy. You'll also want to watch out for emails that impersonate people and organizations you know. A big one is CEOs, executive directors, financial directors. They'll use those names with a different email address to try to convince you that somebody in a position of power is asking you to do something out of the norm. A big one is asking for gift cards. I know that my boss will never ask me over email to go buy a gift card. She'll walk the 5 steps to my office and say, hey, can you take this and go buy a gift card? She's not going to email that to me. I know that the executive director of our Fargo office, he's not going to email me and ask me to bring him $500 or transfer him $500. I know that. I also know he's not going to give me $500 either. So you want to make sure that if you get an email from somebody you believe you know, or an organization you know, and that email sounds too good to be true, double check who it's from and how it looks. And here are my examples. So these are a couple of emails that I received in my own email. This first one is a Chase online alert. The first thing you're going to see is that it's from somebody called Rackspace Support with a really weird email address. I have no idea who that is. That email looks a little weird, so I am hesitant to click anything in that email. Also, I don't have a Chase card and I don't have Chase Bank. So why am I getting a Chase online alert? So those are just a couple things I would look for. The email address and who it came from. Do I even have Chase Bank or a Chase credit card? And then you're looking for a lot of different things in emails. So for example, this is supposed to be a company, but they have no capitalization on the name. It's all lowercase. The grammar is a little odd. The format is a little odd. And if you look down at the link, if you mouse over it, it says that it's going to app.rackspace.com, but when you look at it, it's actually going to thefitdollar.com instead. So when you put in a hyperlink in your email or in a document, you can change what this shows to go to a different website. So I'll send a newsletter and I'll say, click here to look at more information. When you mouse over that, it'll show you the website it's going to. In this instance, they just changed it to what looks like a legitimate website. Finally, they close it with online email team. And very rarely do organizations close something with online email team. It'll be a team that makes sense. So, like a support team, or it'll be an actual person. So, when you get an email like this and you're not sure, look for who it came from. Is it somebody you would expect it to be coming from? Check the grammar and see how things look. And if there are any links that look odd or out of place, you can mouse over them to see where the link is actually going. The other kind of email we talked about was somebody impersonating someone. And this is one of the ones that I get. This is my executive director's name. And the email is asking me to handle a quick request and to get back to them. So, first of all, I look at the email address and I know that that is not my executive director's email address. She has an official email address. That's the only email address she'll email me from. So, right off the bat, I know that this email is incorrect. So, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to respond to this email. Also, she has a full signature. She'll say, thanks, Andrea Olson, executive director. So, this email doesn't look how my executive director will normally send an email. And it also is coming from an email that she would normally email from. So when you get an email from a person of authority, make sure that you're double checking. Does this email look weird? If it looks weird, who actually sent it? Next, we're going to talk about tech updates. I am sure all of us every now and then get a pop up on our computer saying we need to do some updates, and it gives you the option to click remind me later and remind me later and remind me later, and you remind it later for a month. And that can cause a lot of performance issues for your computer, and it can open you up to security issues. So, performing timely updates is important because it includes security patches that are critical to protecting your device. So, sometimes when a company comes out, they'll, with software, you download it on your computer, like Microsoft, and then they discover that there is something wrong with it, they'll perform a patch and they'll send out an update. And if you don't make that update for a very long time, people can exploit that vulnerability to get into your computer and either put a virus on it or get into your computer and take data. So instead of clicking on the remind me later, when you see that your device needs an update, we want you to complete it as soon as possible. Maybe you can't complete it right that minute because you're in a meeting. They usually have a way for you to set it to automatically update when you're done with whatever you're doing. But you'll want to make sure that you're updating on a regular basis because it keeps your computer healthy and it keeps your computer safe. This doesn't just apply to your work computer, you should also apply this to your computer at home and all of your devices like phones and tablets. Finally, for staff specific, I want to let you guys know that it is important that if you see something odd, you should say something, especially when it comes to getting a lot of malicious emails or random emails. So I've talked to our IT management company because for a period of time, every other day I was getting an email like the one I had shown you from my executive director that said Andrea Olson. I received a lot of those. And so that is an unusual pattern. And so I wanted to reach out to our IT company to see if there was a reason why that was happening and if there is a way that we can block those specific domains and see what is happening. Um, the same goes for physical security. If you see somebody snooping around your building, it seems a little odd. You might want to say something to a person of authority. I'm not saying you got to be in everybody's business. I'm just saying that if you see something that's unusual, you should say something. We're going to touch on some organizational best practices as well. So, if you're not the person in charge of your IT, you're not a director, you're not a decision maker, some of these things might not apply directly to you, but you might want to bring them up to the appropriate people in your office. This is in order to ensure that not just your data on your computer is safe, but data in the entire company is safe. So first organizational best practice is to assess and test. So organizations, big and small, should conduct an audit of their current IT infrastructure, so how their IT works, and identify any weaknesses, any potential risks, or any areas for improvement. So they want to test things out. Is it secure right now? Do you need to make changes? to your policies and procedures? Do you need policies and procedures? The first step to making anything better is recognizing where the problems exist and how to make them better. Next is formalize and document. So you'll want to make sure that you're documenting policies, plans, and procedures that define your acceptable use policies and everyone's role in data protection. A lot of nonprofit organizations and a lot of smaller businesses don't have any documented policies or plans and procedures in place. So when something happens, nobody knows what to do. So, in order to be prepared, you'll want to make sure that your company has policies, plans, and procedures and that you've reviewed them. So, if you don't know if your company has an acceptable use policy or information about procedures for when an incident occurs, you might want to reach out to somebody in your office, your IT, your executive director, your supervisor, to see if they can provide you that information so that you know what your role is. You should also make sure our organization develops an incident response plan, which outlines how your organization will respond to specific incidents and who's involved in that process and when. Um, this is super important because if you don't have a plan in place and something bad happens, nobody will know what to do. Nobody will know how to do it, and it will take longer to resolve the problem. And as we saw in some of our examples, the longer you wait to fix it, the harder it is to stop it from happening. So if you don't know what to do if someone hacks in and they're transferring money to people and you don't know how to stop that transfer, it's going to take longer and you're going to lose more money and it's going to take you longer to resolve the issue. In a worst case scenario, you'll be like our friends in California who ended up having to close their business and lay off their employees because they weren't able to resolve the situation. Finally, educate and advocate. So, regular cybersecurity trainings for employees to help emphasize the importance and rationale behind your organization's security measures are important. Not every organization does a regular cybersecurity training, which is why I'm doing one right now, very basic. Um, and not doing cybersecurity training, you'll have a lot of employees who click on random emails or they won't know what the best practices are or how to spot things. So you want to make sure that your staff are prepared. And if you're the staff member and you're not prepared, you might want to bring it up with your supervisor or executive director or decision maker and let them know that this would be beneficial for your organization. The other thing to do is to exercise your incident response plans through simulated scenarios so everyone knows what they need to do, when they need to do it, and how they need to do it. Um, there are incidences that I've been involved in where data from the entire organization is backed up somewhere. In this case, it was supposed to be backed up into the cloud, but nobody tested to make sure the backup was working. And so, in the office that I was working in, there was an issue in the building and there was a fire, and they lost data. So, they went to the backup to get it, but the backup was never backing up any data. They didn't know because they didn't test it out. Same with incident responses for data breaches or phishing attacks, things like that. If you don't have a plan and you don't practice that plan, when an actual situation arises, it's very hard to remain calm and follow a plan. So practice and learn. And if your organization doesn't have a cybersecurity training or an incident response plan, take an opportunity to talk to the decision makers, your executive director, your supervisor, to see if you can get something started or if they can get something started for your organization. With that, that's the end of the cybersecurity training, but I do want to direct you to a few resources that we have available for you. On our capnd.org website, if you navigate to our schedule and events page, you'll be able to access information about Tech Talk, including the registration link if you want to invite anybody to Tech Talk. These sessions are recorded and they are going to be made available on our YouTube channel on demand. But we'll have a link there. And then down at the bottom, we are including resources for our Tech Talks. So here there are some cybersecurity resources, some password tips, The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. They have a whole series called Secure Our World that has videos and information sheets that might be helpful for you or your office. And then finally, a link that talks about cybersecurity for nonprofits that might be beneficial to your supervisors or yourself to get started on ensuring that you have appropriate incident response plans and you have kind of an appropriate frame of mind with cybersecurity in your organization. With that, I'd like to thank you all for being here and those of you who will be watching this on demand. The next Tech Talk is going to be on February 15th, and we're going to be talking about some Zoom basics. There have been some updates to Zoom, and I like to do a little Zoom training every year to get people accustomed to using Zoom since we've come to more of a digital hybrid world. If you guys have any questions or you would like more information, you can reach me at my email address, which I've included on the screen. You can also find more information on our website or at our YouTube channel, Train CapND. Other than that, we have about 10 minutes and we're a smaller group, so I want to open it up. If you guys have any questions, you can unmute or put them in the chat, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have. Well, as we say, silence is consent, and silence means we're good. So if you guys don't have any questions, I will let you guys get a little bit time back for your day. Please feel free to head on out to the CapND website or the Train CapND channel to view any of our current Tech Talks from 2023 that are out there and any resources that are available for cybersecurity and Zoom. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the week.
Thank you.
You're welcome.